Accrediting Excellence, the international authority for professional coaching and mentoring, proudly presents Both Sides of the Coin.
Hello, everybody. Have you ever known exactly what to do? Had the strategy, had the plan, even the discipline, and yet something still didn't shift the way you expected? What if the reason nothing is shifted isn't what you are doing, but is what and where you are doing it from? For many leaders, that moment marks a big realization. The real change doesn't always begin with doing more, but with understanding where we are acting from. And before we go further and introduce my esteemed guests, I'd like to take a moment to thank you, our listeners, because this podcast exists because of you. And it is here to best serve you with professional conversations about coaching and change. And I'm genuinely grateful that you are listening and reflect in the same time with us. And also, I'm very grateful for our guests today who generously share both their professional insight and lived experience so we can explore coaching in a real and meaningful way. Welcome to the Both Sides of the Coin, a podcast produced by the International Authority for Professional Coaching and Mentoring, the IAPCM. I'm Catalina Flore, an accredited fellow coach specializing in executive coaching, leadership development, and health coaching. In this podcast, we explore coaching from two perspectives, the coach and the client, to understand what genuinely supports people through various endeavors. And many of our listeners are coaches, leaders, and entrepreneurs. So as you're listening today, I invite you to notice not just what is said, but also how coaching supports clarity, self-trust, and the ability to lead and decide from a deeper place. And that's exactly what we are going to be exploring today, where really actual transformations begins. So joining me today are Rich Waterman, a performance coach, a former senior leader, senior trainer with Tony Robbins. And he helps founders and leaders eliminate decision drag, leadership bottlenecks, and hidden performance constraints inside their businesses. His work aligns strategy, culture, and human performance, so ambitious leaders can create extraordinary results without losing themselves in the process. And I'm very honored that his client, Dr. Chris Joseph, is here as well. And I will start first with Richard Rich, and I will flip the coin to Chris in a moment. So, Rich, may I call you Rich also on this one?
You can always call me Rich. It's a great reference for personal development.
Yes, exactly. So, Rich, tell us who you are and who are you to speak on this subject matter?
So I think I'm just someone that's fascinated in helping people bring forward the best version of themselves. And that's a journey both on my own development, but also from doing formal coach training in the past, but then kind of adding my own twist on it as I saw the power of being and presence.
That's beautiful. And I'm curious, if you reflect honestly on your earlier work, right? And what do you believe that created results back then? And what do you see differently now?
Yeah, great question. So I think So obviously my background in training was end up becoming a NLP trainer with Dr. Richard Bandler, and also you and I both shared the journey through Tony Robbins as well. And I think I framed coaching back then as fixing problems, quite frankly. And I think that's a very, very small part of the game. Actually, I think if you can help people to come from the place of who they really are, a lot of those problems go away anyway, and it gives them an opportunity to be extraordinary rather than just fixing things and getting back to normality, as probably most of my experiences were in the early days.
Yeah, and there is the process of right that help you shift towards a much deeper level, and we get into this. And first let's clarify for people who might not know. We often hear this inside in, outside in, and inside out, actually, but many coaches still operate without clearly distinguishing them. And if you had to make it very clear, what is the real difference in where the work begins?
Yeah, so I would say outside in, which is where I started, is conscious mind, people presenting what they're seeing, and it often is problem focused. So once I clear up that stuff, then I can really focus on who I really am. And then I think inside out is let's focus on who you really are, your being, your presence, your limitless soul. Let's feed and nourish that and get you operating from that place and how that is expressed outside into the world. So I think personally think that's a way more powerful process and creates a lot more possibility than the outside in approach.
Yeah, I'm just curious because we're starting many years ago, both of us. Probably started a little bit with problem solving, right?
Yes.
When you move, let's give some hope here to coaches that are at the beginning of the work. Did you have that desired when you're operating at that level also to reflect your model of the world on them and trying to solve their problem and doing coaching?
Yeah, I think that's accurate. Like I had a toolkit, I had a skill set that I'd learned through NLP and through Tony Robbins. And it's like, okay, what tool can I give to you to use that's going to help you to improve your situation? So it's very effective, and I think it can be very, very useful as well. It's just that I don't think it's the whole picture anymore, but you can help a lot of people from that space, particularly if you allow them to use the tool rather than you doing the tool on them.
Right. And it can be very alluring, right? It gives a sense of, yep.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, as a practitioner, I remember both of us did it in the Robbins environment. Is you can help people shift really quickly, so that actually can be quite addictive as a coach because you're seeing someone change in front of you. And then I think the work that we didn't do was then right now what's possible for you.
Correct.
I think there's a little bit of compelling future, but I think it was a bit of an afterthought. It wasn't the main bit of the show, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And as people listen to this, how might they recognize, Rich, in themselves that they are primarily operating outside in?
I think there's going to be a lot of conscious thought, a lot of controlling. They'll probably recognize a lot of kind of what I call ego survival responses. So where you're trying to protect ego, you're trying to survive. You're probably dealing with stuff that you've made up and your ego is convincing you that you need to deal with it. And you're probably not operating from a place of kind of trust, flow, ease, grace, these sort of words. I think that's the clue, is an absence of those things.
And, also from your experience and from when you work with leaders and coaches, right, as well, there is a moment of decision for a coach. Do I go left towards problem solving, or do I go in a deep dive?
Yeah.
Yeah. And what
Yeah.
does a coach need to take the deep dive? What do you think it's needed?
I think there's a couple of elements that show through strongly for me. So one of which was my own personal experience of going on a deep dive and how I could relate to that and how powerful it was. And then I think also if you're then moving that into being the coach, then I think there's an element of letting go, an element of trust that this is the right path for this particular client. And even though maybe the outcome is less obvious and less certain, that the usually the outcome is very powerful.
And how did you develop for yourself this trust, and how do you help your clients develop for themselves when they do their own coaching?
So developing my own trust was very much an exploratory journey by myself, and actually an exploratory journey with the client you're about to speak to, Chris. Um, and for me, it was seeing the benefits of that journey. So I mean, both you and I know about back in 2014 when we raised money for George's daughter Leonore, and what the benefits of presenting, being, and presence were for that. And then I think with the client, it's very much giving them a space where there's a lot of certainty provided by the coach, a lot of reassurance, permission to stumble, to make mistakes, to sometimes get very emotional. That's all part of the journey, and it's all good feedback. There isn't any right or wrong in that this kind of inner journey.
Yeah. Rich, I love talking to you. Somehow it's transforming somehow in a roadmap for coaches that want to go in that direction, right? And then reach the mastery that is needed, right? You work with highly capable leaders, either corporations, entrepreneurs, people who, many of them already know what to do. Is there a pattern you see where more thinking, more strategy, even more effort actually keeps the problem in place?
Yeah, I do think, particularly I've worked with founders, business owners, and they've got to a point where the business really is quite successful, but they've almost created a trap for themselves where they feel they have to operate a certain way for that business to work. And usually there's a lot of cost to it, personal cost often, stress, low energy, relationships failing, these sort of things. So they feel like, well, I need to keep this business going to generate money for me and for my team members that I'm employing, and I don't know another way to do it. And they know it doesn't make sense, but they don't know another way, and that can be really, really debilitating for them.
Fantastic. Now, inside out coaching can sound abstract to some people. Identity, being, internal reference point. Can you bring this down to earth for our audience? What actually shifts inside a person when this work lands? And also, maybe you can share an example, a short example of a client that the shift became visible.
Yeah. So we usually talk about kind of what's not working first. So like kind of, this sort of stressful thinking, this protectionist thinking, this survival thinking. And then I usually will go to, well, what times in their life have they felt where things were easier, more graceful, more in flow? And are there examples in their current life where they can access that state? Is it being in nature? Is it spending great time with friends? Is it playing sport? These sort of things. And really focusing on what that energy feels like and coming from that space. And then I think a big part of being in the moment, being present, coming from that inner space, is also having a really good relationship with other two time periods in their life, which is their past. So making sure they're not looking back with guilt and shame, but instead they're using it as a resource and experience. And their future, which of course is completely made up, Are they accessing the future with anxiety and fear, or is it from a visionary creation point of view? So once they get the past and the future lined up, generally that enables them to access the present on a more consistent basis. And I think that's where the inner being gets expressed better.
Yeah. And knowing you, are very well trained. You can go very deep with people. Where do you draw the line between coaching and therapy? In helping people deal with shame, with guilt, with debilitating emotions from the past that are not digested.
Yeah. So I think my responsibility as a coach is to talk about the frameworks and to offer those frameworks and tools and to see how they land. And then undoubtedly you do get some clients who, while they appreciate the value of the framework and the tool, there's probably a lot more things going on than I am qualified to deal with or really should deal with. So in this case, I think that's where the interface between the coach and the therapist is useful, because the coach can provide a useful framework moving forward, but there may need to be some therapy in the meantime to enable that client to effectively use those frameworks. So I think it is important to understand where that coach boundary sits and when to say, I need to refer you to someone that's an expert in therapy.
Fantastic. Now, many of your clients, maybe as well, have built their success on control, discipline, drive, boom. What happens when those strengths quietly become limitation?
Oh, that's a great question. So, yes, I remember your previous question. I forgot to tell you a story. So let me give you a story. So, um, often when we come back to presence and being and that inner work, they identify, what are your strongest nature of your identity? What's the strongest part of your character? So I've got a client currently who runs very successful veterinary practice, and he is absolutely brilliant at structuring things, organizing things, control. And then what I think that tends to identify is the dark side of that, which is any overused skill can become problematic. So particularly with the team members, you start to over control and over structure, they can feel like they're trapped or put in a box and feel like they're being their ability to express themselves is limited. So I think we always need to look out for that. Is like, I absolutely want you to play the game from the best version of yourself, but being aware of where that can become problematic if overdone.
Yeah. Rich, do you notice that the resistance your clients might have isn't usually about change itself, but about who they need to become for the change to happen? And it might be unconsciously or consciously. Can we expand on this?
Yeah, so I very much agree with that, and I think this comes back to the word trust. So um, some clients, it's very clear I've not been operating from the best version of me, and if I did, it would be amazing. And other clients, it's like, I'm not totally sure what the best version of me is. And that can be quite uncertain and it can be quite scary sometimes. It's like, I don't really know who that person is. And I don't know what stepping into that person will feel like. And again, that is a little bit of hand holding, a little bit of trust on both sides to go, well, should we just see? Because often their success being created by a sort of limited version of who they really are, and they're not actually really connected to the true version of themselves. With some clients, not all clients.
Yeah. So let's go deeper. And then you deepen the conversation. And how do you sense now we move into action versus now we stay at deepen awareness?
I think the biggest thing that I notice when someone really steps into a deeper awareness is a really strong understanding of what's important and also what needs to be done, and actually how simple that is. So I think I often see when people do deep work is simplicity shows up a lot and clarity shows up a lot. And the energy shifts, and it's like I know what to do, and I know that I'm absolutely capable of doing it. So they see possibility rather than problems. Um, and that's a noticeable shift in energy.
Yeah, and the as coaching deepens, right? And that is also from your personal experience, and especially in the kind of work you do and for your clients, especially into identity work, internal transformation, linked with all the strategic work that you do. The question of standards becomes more important. Do you think it's possible to do the level of work responsibly without a strong foundation of accreditation, supervision, ongoing development? And what role, this can play in our own judgment as a coach?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think it's really important to have, in whatever way you choose to coach, I think it's important to have grounding in what you're doing. So, in my case, it is a mixture, if I'm honest. So I've got some background grounding in NLP and the Tony Robbins neuroassociative conditioning. What I've then done is develop tools and techniques layered on top of that, which are referenced from sort of proven tools and techniques from other areas. So I've kind of got the baseline accreditation, and then I tend to do stuff that is referencing other accredited work. And I think it's important as the coach to have a level of confidence that you are doing work that is proven, and then I think it's where accreditation comes in, because you know that it's an area that's been deeply studied and worked on, and I think then it's a question of finding out, okay, which bits suit the way that I want to coach. And yeah, it's interesting. I've sort of realized that I've ended up parallel developing tools and techniques that actually ended up referencing to existing accreditation. I just did my own journey in it in some cases. But I think it's important to think about the validity of what you're doing. That's where accreditation is a very sort of it's a very comforting framework to reference to, I think.
Right. And innovation never stops, right? It comes
Yeah.
organically as we develop ourselves and we grow in this journey. So from your own observations, your clients, who does a leader become when this shift truly happens? When identity shifts, when presence becomes a way of being?
So it's not accidental that I call a lot of the work I do human performance. And I think that I see leaders becoming more human. And we often talk about that, about leading by example. And I think the greatest thing that a leader can do in an organization is to be that example of what powerful inner work can create of being and presence, because it is infectious. It creates a culture that by nature, people just working and being in that culture impacts them in a positive way. So I think the old days of kind of title leadership, where the people were being told what to do, I think is being replaced by leaders being the example of how to be. And that obviously encourages all the team to hopefully be the best version of themselves. And that way your capacity of the business increases exponentially.
And I would love to continue the conversation with you, and I need to wrap it up for time constraint. But if there is one thing leaders or coaches you coach and anybody from our audience should take away from our conversation, what would it be?
I always think there's three levels to this. So I think the leader being in a great place is the most important. So again, using this past, present, future model, how can I consistently work on my inner self to be the best version of me? I think then there's a consideration of the team. How is the team doing? and how can we help each other as a team to do well. And then there's, I think, the interaction between the leader and an individual. How are you doing? How can I help you with your own inner work appropriately? Because there might not be a coach to be in the best place. And I do think that I would encourage people with the inner work. There are structures and frameworks that you can use that are very effective. It isn't fuzzy or vague or hard to pin down. It's just a question of finding the tools and techniques that are going to help you most. And some will and some won't. So be flexible in your approach towards this inner work as well.
Thank you so much. And I'd love to flip the coin now and talk to Dr. Chris Joseph. May I call you Chris?
You may, Catalina, yes.
Chris, it's a pleasure. Thank you for being with us today. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself and what was happening for you when you first realized that what you were doing wasn't quite working the way you wanted and start working with Rich.
Yeah. So a little bit about myself. I'm now a transformational coach myself. I wasn't back when I first started working with Rich. I'm based here in near Cardiff in Wales, and I have a family, wife and two kids. There's a big element of trust, I think, in becoming a client to a coach, and also dive in deep enough into the work that you can actually benefit from the transformation. I think I think the fact that we obviously did know each other meant that when I was going through a difficulty, and that was when I was trying to finish my PhD in computational mechanics in civil engineering, and fell into a period of depression and kind of very uncertain about who I was really and what I wanted to do, then Rich was the person I kind of turned to. And then we had that initial conversation.
Wonderful. And before working with Rich, where was your main focus? On fixing things externally, improving strategies, doing more?
Yes, yeah. Well, you know me very well, Catalina, and we've only just met. That's exactly how I was. I would probably back then describe myself as a perfectionist. I was a high academic achiever, top in my school year, top in my university degree, and I was studying for a PhD. So very much trying to, I think, establish self-worth through external creation, which is never a good recipe because, as you pointed to earlier on the call, it's an inside-out work, the creation of self-worth.
And tell me, you work with Rich, and what felt different about his approach compared to more traditional coaching or problem-solving coaching? What felt different for you?
Yeah, I think it's important to note as well that pretty much at the same time that I started working with Rich, I also had some CBT counseling, cognitive behavioral therapy counseling. So the point Rich made earlier is very valid. I think I needed that. I needed that space to download, to kind of get an insight as to what underlying beliefs I held from my childhood that were the reasons for my kind of overachievement and perfectionism. And that was explored in the therapy work. And then what Rich really helped me with was to slow down, and then to see how I could actually use those insights to explore who I actually was and who I wanted to be moving forwards. And he also used many models at the time. He was doing his own kind of training work through the Robbins world, and he taught me much of the early models, coaching models, NLP frameworks, that's I still use to this day in my own work. So yeah, it was I think it was the forward vision that was the key, aspect of what Rich offered in that early phase of our work together.
Beautiful. And today, what has changed most? I'm curious, not just in what you achieve, but in how you experience your leading and deciding and your life.
That's a big question. Everything, quite literally everything. I think Rich is somebody who has a wonderful presence.
Yes.
So you naturally feel safe in his presence. He has what I call a gravitas to him. And even though his work more recently is focused on being, I think what he didn't appreciate back then was that he was still emanating that depth of being. So I think that was very beneficial to me because I'm a believer that the highest form of coaching is not in what we say as coaches, but in how we show up energetically. So I think what Rich modeled for me at that time was it's okay to slow down, and it's okay to become comfortable in my own skin. I don't actually have to do anything. And because of that truth, I can actually do everything, but from a place of internal freedom. And when you get that, and I also then went on to train personally in mindfulness with a company called Breathworks, and I think when you get that it's the essence of your being, that's at the heart of everything, and then what you practice externally should be a manifestation and an honoring of that, then your life literally changes. Living inside out versus outside in is just chalk and cheese. Completely different ways of experiencing life.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing this with us. And I will end up with the last question, actually. What are you looking for in a coach?
What I'm personally looking for in a coach is somebody who's willing to slow down enough to be able to see me fully, to be able to hold space for me, to be just me. And somebody who inspires me as well through how they are living their own life. And I think when I see that, when I feel inspired by being in the presence of somebody like Rich, then it triggers that desire within me to be, the best possible form of myself, and in my respective career, which is similar to Rich, to transform the lives of my own clients. So I think Rich appreciates this to a degree, but I will call it out here explicitly. The service which he offered me at that time, and we still continue to work together. So it has been over multiple years now. It's been completely invaluable to myself in having the confidence to be more of myself, but then it's gone on to touch the hearts and lives of so many other people of my clients, and the families of my clients, and the employees of my clients. So it's quite unreal, I think, and we don't often really come face to face with this as coaches. It's unreal the amount of knock-on benefit and life change that we create through our work.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And it says, again, how important our presence is in this world, beyond everything that we know and we do, right? Thank you both for such an open and thought-provoking conversation. And what stands out for me is that real transformation doesn't come from doing more, pushing harder or refining strategy alone. And it often begins with a deeper shift in how we see ourselves, how we think, and where we act from. And for coaches listening, this conversation is a reminder that our role is not only to support action and results, but to create a space, as Chris was saying, right, where deeper awareness can emerge, allowing more alignment and allowing that sustainable change to follow, to be birthed, if you like. And as this work deepens, so too does our responsibility to remain grounded, well-trained, and supported in how we show up for our clients. The IAPCM is committed to helping coaches improve their coaching skills as well as build their businesses. And if you are a coach and would like support with developing your practice, you can access hundreds of hours of masterclasses in the events and webinars section of the IAPCM website at coach-accreditation.services. And you can also find further coaching insights on the blog at coachyourself.blog, and of course, explore more than our 50 podcast episodes. And we are confident that anyone who attains an International Authority for Professional Coaching and Mentoring accreditation will be among the very best the profession has to offer. And if you are interested in working with an accredited coach or becoming accredited yourself, you can find more at coach-accreditation.services. And finally, if there is a topic you'd like me to cover in future episodes of both sides of the coin, I'd love to hear from you. You can email me at catalina.podcast@coach-accreditation.services. Thank you so much for listening. If you like, please follow us, and the algorithm will deliver the best episodes to you. And goodbye for now. Thank you.